The departure Julian Hayes squinted through his viewfinder, adjusting the aperture on his vintage Leica. Perfect, he murmured, capturing the late afternoon light as it spilled across Sophia's workspace. Her hands moved deftly over fabric, pins, held between her lips as she draped midnight blue silk across a mannequin. "You're distracting me again," Sophia Winters said without looking up, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Her honey blonde hair was twisted into a messy bun, wisps escaping to frame her face. The cramped Brooklyn apartment doubled as her design studio, every surface covered with sketches and fabric swatches. "I can't help it," Julian replied, lowering his camera. "You're magic when you work." 3 years into their relationship, and Julian still found himself mesmerized by Sophia's quiet intensity. While he chased the perfect shot, she created wearable art from nothing but imagination and skilled hands. They'd met at a gallery opening where his photography was featured, alongside her costume designs for an independent theater production. "Magazine called," Julian said, setting his camera down carefully. "They want me for the Milan shoot next month." Sophia looked up, a genuine smile lighting her face. "Julian, that's incredible. Vantage is exactly the break you've been working toward." "It means working with Natalie Porter," he added, trying to sound casual about photographing one of the industry's most sought-after models. "She'll be lucky to work with you." Sophia stood, stretching her back after hours hunched over her work. "We should celebrate tonight." Julian nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead to Milan, to the connections he would make, to finally stepping into the spotlight he'd been chasing. The Milan shoot changed everything. Julian returned with a portfolio that opened doors too: exclusive parties and high-profile clients. Their tiny apartment became a revolving door of models, stylists, and industry insiders. Sophia's quiet corner with her sewing machine shrank further with each passing week. "You should come tonight," Julian said one evening, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "Eloise is hosting at that new rooftop bar in Manhattan." Sophia glanced up from her sketchbook. "I have that deadline for the theater company. Besides, time I came, I spent the evening watching you network while nursing the same drink for hours. That's how the industry works, Soph. You have to be seen with the right people. I'm not the right people." Her voice remained even, but her eyes betrayed her hurt. Julian sighed. "That's not what I meant. But these connections are important for my career, and my work isn't." She set down her pencil. "Julian, when was the last time you asked about my new collection?" He checked his watch. "We'll talk about it tomorrow, okay? I'm already running late." As the months passed, their conversations grew shorter, the distance between them widening like a slow-moving fault line. Julian's schedule filled with exclusive shoots and parties that Sophia was technically invited to, but never quite welcomed at. Her presence became a complication, her career in theatrical costume design deemed quaint by his new circle. The breaking point came during Fashion Week. Julian had been hired to shoot behind the scenes for a major designer. An unexpected invitation through a theater connection arrived at the after-party, hoping to surprise him. She found him in a corner, his camera forgotten, lips pressed against those of a willowy model whose face adorned billboards across the city. When he spotted Sophia, his expression shifted from shock to something worse, annoyance at the interruption. "Sophia, I didn't know you were coming," he said, stepping away from the model, who merely looked bored by the intrusion. "Clearly," Sophia replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I should go." "Wait." Julian glanced between Sophia and the model, caught between worlds. "Let me explain." "This isn't exactly what it looks like," Sophia cut him off. "But it's also been happening for months in different ways, hasn't it? I just refused to see it." 3 days later, she was gone from their apartment, leaving behind only a note: "We've chosen different paths. Hope yours brings you what you're looking for." And Julian barely noticed her absence in the whirlwind of his rising career. It wasn't until weeks later, scrolling through old photographs, that he realized what he'd lost, not just Sophia, but the person he'd been when they were together. Silent transformation. The Milan rain fell in sheets as Sophia dragged her suitcase through narrow cobblestone streets. Water seeped through her worn boots, but she pressed on, following directions to the small apartment she'd rented sight unseen. 3 months had passed since she'd left New York. 3 months of rebuilding herself from the ground up, her phone buzzed with another message from Julian, his fifth this week, after weeks of silence. She didn't read it. Whatever crisis of conscience he was experiencing wasn't her burden to bear anymore. The apartment was tiny but flooded with natural light. It was perfect for her work. The theater company in Milan had hired her based on her New York portfolio, offering her a position designing costumes for their avant-garde productions. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. "You are the American designer?" a voice called from an adjacent balcony one evening as Sophia watered her newly purchased plants. She turned to see a woman in her 60s with elegantly coiffed silver hair, draped in a silk caftan that Sophia immediately recognized as vintage Valentino. "I'm Sophia. Sophia Winters." "Bianca Ricci," the woman replied with a warm smile. "I was a pattern maker for Versace for 30 years. Your sewing machine keeps the same hours as mine once did." That conversation blossomed into a friendship that would alter Sophia's trajectory. Bianca saw something in Sophia's theatrical designs, a boldness and precision that, she insisted, belonged on runways, not just stages. "You think too small." Bianca told her one evening over espresso in Sophia's apartment, "Your theater work is good. But these," she gestured to sketches Sophia had been developing privately, designs that blended architectural elements with flowing silhouettes. "These should be worn by women who understand their power." Under Bianca's mentorship, Sophia refined her technical skills. She learned the language of Italian craftsmanship, the secrets of fabrics and construction that had been passed down through generations. During days, she fulfilled her theater obligations. During nights, she built her own collection. It was Bianca who arranged the meeting with Lorenzo Vicenti. Though she hadn't told Sophia who would be attending the small industry gathering in her apartment. "He never comes to these things," whispered an accessories designer when Lorenzo entered the room. Tall, with olive skin and thoughtful eyes, Lorenzo moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. At 42, he had transformed his family's struggling textile business into a global luxury conglomerate that owns shares in some of Italy's most prestigious fashion houses. Unlike the other industry titans Sophia had glimpsed in New York, Lorenzo asked questions more than he spoke. He listened intently to each designer, offering specific feedback that revealed his deep understanding of both creativity and commerce. When he reached Sophia, she expected a polite dismissal. Instead, he spent nearly an hour examining her portfolio, asking detailed questions about her construction techniques and inspiration. "You see clothing as identity, not just adornment," he observed, lingering over a design that featured subtle, transformable elements. "Oh, why have you hidden this talent?" "On theater stages? I never had the connections to do otherwise," Sophia admitted. "Connections," Lorenzo said with a slight smile, "are merely introductions. Talent is what keeps the door open after the introduction is made." 2 weeks later, Sophia received an offer to design a capsule collection for one of Lorenzo's smaller brands, and opportunity to translate her theatrical sensibilities to ready-to-wear. The salary was modest, but the platform was priceless. Working with Lorenzo proved surprisingly easy. Unlike Julian, who had grown increasingly dismissive of her creative process, Lorenzo valued her perspective. Their professional relationship remained respectful, characterized by thoughtful exchanges about design, philosophy, and market positioning. "You've created something authentic," Lorenzo told her, when her first collection exceeded sales projections. In an industry of copies, authenticity is revolutionary. As months turned into a year, Sophia's name began appearing in industry publications. Her designs, architectural yet fluid, dramatic yet wearable, attracted a devoted clientele who appreciated their subtle complexity. When Lorenzo offered her a larger role developing a new luxury brand under his company's umbrella, she accepted without hesitation. Their working relationship deepened into friendship during late nights at the atelier and early morning meetings. Over pastries and coffee, she learned about his childhood in a small village outside Florence, his passion for preserving traditional Italian craftsmanship, His failed marriage to a French model who had found his dedication to work unbearable. She wanted the lifestyle my work could provide, but not the work itself. He explained one evening as they reviewed fabric samples. I think perhaps I love the idea of her more than I knew her. Sophia nodded, understanding more than she wanted to admit. Sometimes we see what we want to see in people. As her second year in Milan drew to a close, Sophia rarely thought of Julian anymore. The pain had faded, replaced by gratitude for the journey that had led her here. When Lorenzo invited her to dinner at his villa overlooking Lake Como, that had nothing to do with work, she surprised herself by accepting without hesitation. Under a canopy of stars, with the lake shimmering below, Lorenzo poured her a glass of wine and asked, "Are you happy here, Sophia?" She considered the question carefully. "I'm more than happy. I'm becoming who I was always meant to be." His hand found hers across the table, a gentle touch that asked a question. Her fingers interlaced with his, offering an answer. Ascending stars. Julian Hayes stared at the contact sheet on his laptop, dissatisfaction gnawing at him. The images were technically perfect, lighting flawless, composition impeccable, yet something vital was missing. The editor had used the word derivative in her feedback, a single word that had haunted him for weeks. His loft in Manhattan's meatpacking district should have felt like the embodiment of success. Instead, it echoed with emptiness, minimalist. Furniture and framed photographs occupying space without creating a home. "You need to reinvent yourself," his agent Dominic declared during their monthly meeting. "The industry is shifting. Those moody portraits that made your name, everyone's doing them now." Julian rubbed his temples. "I'm working on new concepts."
"Work faster,"
Dominic replied, sliding a tablet across the table. "And check your social metrics. They're slipping." 2 years had passed since Sophia left. Initially, Julian had barely registered her absence, too intoxicated by his rapid ascent. When he finally reached out months later, her responses were polite but distant. Eventually, they stopped altogether. He dated casually models, influencers, a gallery owner, relationships that burned bright and faded quickly. None of them challenged him the way Sophia had. With her quiet observations that cut through his pretensions, the invitations to exclusive events continued. But increasingly, Julian found himself on the periphery rather than at the center. Newer photographers emerged, their styles fresher, their social connections more relevant. The industry's fickle attention began shifting elsewhere. "You should come to the Beneveni Gala next month," Dominic suggested. "Word is they're looking for a photographer for their new campaign. Could be your comeback moment." Julian nodded, though the thought of another night of calculated networking exhausted him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd taken a photograph, simply because something moved him rather than because it might advance his career. Across the Atlantic, Sophia's life had transformed beyond recognition. The luxury brand she developed with Lorenzo Winters and Vicenta had become fashion's most compelling success story. Her designs combined theatrical drama with wearable sophistication, attracting celebrities and everyday women alike. More surprising than her professional success was her personal happiness. Her relationship with Lorenzo had deepened gradually, built on mutual respect and genuine understanding. Unlike Julian, who had wanted her to orbit his world, Lorenzo created space for her to shine in her own right. The Paris expansion is confirmed, Lorenzo announced one morning as they shared breakfast on the terrace of his Milan apartment, now their shared home. The building on Rue Saint-Honore. It's ours. Sophia looked up from her sketches, joy bubbling. Through her, "That's incredible." "Something else," Lorenzo said, reaching for her hand. His expression shifted from business confidence to uncharacteristic nervousness. "I had planned something elaborate, but I find I cannot wait." From his pocket, he withdrew a small box containing a ring of hammered gold set with a single perfect diamond. "I love you not because of what you create, though that is magnificent," he said softly. "I love you because of who you are, your resilience, your kindness, your unwavering integrity. Will you marry me, Sophia?" Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded, words momentarily beyond her. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, it felt like the completion of a journey she hadn't known she was on, News of their engagement spread quickly. Through industry circles, Vogue Italia featured them in a spread titled Fashion's Power Couple, highlighting how their partnership had disrupted luxury fashion's traditional business model. "We complement each other," Sophia explained in the interview. "Lorenzo understands the business of beauty, and I try to create beauty that means something beyond business." When the invitation to be the featured designer at the Beneveni Foundation's annual gala arrived, fashion's most prestigious charitable event, Sophia accepted with quiet pride. The event would serve as both a professional triumph and a debut of sorts for her new role as Lorenzo's fiancée. "Many of the industry's American players will be there," Lorenzo mentioned as they discussed the event. "Does that concern you?" Sophia considered the question, thinking briefly of Julian. "No," she said truthfully. "That part of my life feels like a different person's story now." As she spoke the words, she realized they were true. The pain Julian had caused had been transformed, alchemized into the determination that had brought her here. For that, perhaps she could even be grateful. Collision coursed the Beneventi Gala, transformed Milan's historic Palazzo Reale into a shimmering dreamscape. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over the assembled fashion elite, while Renaissance masterpieces gazed down from gilded frames. Julian moved through the crowd with practiced ease, camera slung around his neck more as a symbol of his profession than a tool he expected to use. "Smile like you mean it," Dominic muttered, appearing at his side with 2 champagne flutes. Beneventi creative director is watching. Julian accepted the champagne and manufactured his most charming smile, though internally he felt hollow. The past year had been a study in diminishing return smaller campaigns, reduced day rates, and the creeping realization that he was becoming irrelevant. This night represented possibly his last chance to reclaim his former standing. "Who's causing the commotion at the entrance?" Julian asked, noticing a shift in the room's energy as heads turned toward the grand doorway. Dominic craned his neck. "Must be the designer everyone's talking about, the American who's revolutionizing Italian fashion. Apparently she's engaged to Lorenzo Vicenti now." Julian's glass paused halfway to his lips. "What's her name?" "Winters, I think." "Sophia Winters." Champagne turned bitter on Julian's tongue. Sophia was here, engaged to Lorenzo Vicenti, the notoriously private billionaire whose business acumen was legendary in luxury circles. It seemed impossible before he could process this information. The crowd parted like a silk curtain, and there she was. Sophia entered on Lorenzo's arm, wearing a gown of her own designed deep emerald silk that caught the light with every movement, revealing hand-embroidered constellations in gold thread. Her hair, once always carelessly bundled atop her head while she worked, was now styled in elegant waves that framed her face. But it was her expression that struck Julian most, serene confidence radiating from within. Lorenzo Vicenti moved beside her with understated elegance, his attention focused entirely on Sophia rather than the admiring crowd. Their connection was palpable, evident in small gestures, his hand at the small of her back, her smile when he whispered something in her ear. "Earth to Julian," Dominic nudged him. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Julian murmured, unable to tear his gaze away from Sophia. "I know her. We were together in New York before." Recognition dawned on Dominic's face. "Wait, she's that designer? The one from your Brooklyn days?" He let out a low whistle. Talk about a glope. Julian barely heard him. Memories cascaded through his mind, Sophia working late into the night on her designs. Her unshakable belief in his talent when he doubted himself, the hurt in her eyes the last time he'd seen her. He had dismissed her dreams as modest compared to his ambitions, convinced she couldn't understand the world he aspired to enter. Now she commanded that very world with a grace he'd never achieved. Throughout the evening, Julian found himself orbiting Sophia and Lorenzo, maintaining enough distance to observe without initiating contact. He watched as industry titans, who had once barely acknowledged his existence, sought Sophia's approval. Her manner remained unchanged, attentive, thoughtful, genuinely interested in others despite her elevated status. During dinner, Julian found himself seated at a table adjacent to theirs, close enough to overhear snippets of conversation. He learned that Sophia had created a foundation to support young designers from underprivileged backgrounds, that her newest collection incorporated sustainable practices, revolutionizing luxury production, that her relationship with Lorenzo had begun as a creative partnership before blossoming into love. "Her trajectory is remarkable," commented the magazine editor seated beside Julian, "especially considering she arrived in Milan with nothing but talent and determination just 3 years ago." Julian nodded, unable to form a response. 3 years that had transformed Sophia into an industry force. While his own star had gradually dimmed, the pinnacle of the evening came when Sophia was invited to speak. Standing at the podium in her constellation gown, she addressed the audience. "With quiet authority, fashion at its best is transformation," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the grand hall. "Not just of fabric into garments, but of ideas into reality, of challenges into opportunities." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. 3 years ago, I faced a painful ending that I thought defined me. Today I understand it was merely the beginning of a journey toward authenticity, in my work and in my heart." Her eyes met Julian's. For the briefest moment, a flicker of recognition crossing her features before she continued her speech. That fleeting connection sent a jolt through him, not because she appeared angry or triumphant, but because she looked at him with something like compassion before turning her attention elsewhere. When the formal program concluded, Julian found himself at the bar, ordering something stronger than champagne. A presence beside him made him turn. "Hello, Julian?" Sophia's voice was warm but measured, lacking both the adoration of their past and the bitterness he might have expected. "Sophia," he struggled to find appropriate words. "You look? Your work is incredible." "Thank you." She accepted a water from the bartender. "I heard you've been doing well with your photography." He couldn't bring himself to correct her assumption. "Nothing compared to what you've accomplished." She shook her head slightly. "It was never a competition, Julian. Mr. Hayes." Lorenzo appeared at Sophia's side, his hand resting lightly on her back. "I admired your series for Vantage magazine. You have a distinctive eye." Julian managed to thank him, struck by the genuine appreciation in Lorenzo's voice. There was no territorial display, no subtle intimidation, just one creative acknowledging another. "Should rejoin the trustees," Lorenzo said to Sophia before turning back to Julian. "Perhaps we could discuss you photographing our fall campaign. Sophia has mentioned your talent for capturing authentic moments." Julian blinked in surprise. "I'd be honored." As they prepared to leave, Sophia looked at Julian one last time. "Hope you find what you're looking for, Julian. I truly do." Watching them walk away, Julian was struck by the realization that Sophia had achieved everything he had pursued: recognition, influence, connection, but somehow had retained the authenticity he had sacrificed along the way. While he had chased the appearance of success, she had built something real. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had left her behind, believing she would limit his rise, only to discover she had soared higher than he ever had. Reflections in gold morning light streamed through the windows of Julian's hotel room as he stared at the ceiling, sleep having eluded him most of the night. Beside him, his phone displayed an email from Lorenzo Vicenti's company and official invitation to discuss photographing their upcoming campaign, professional lifeline he knew he didn't deserve. The previous evening played on loop in his mind, Sophia radiant in her success, Lorenzo's genuine respect for her, and the undeniable connection between them that went beyond romance into true partnership. Most haunting was Sophia's parting words. "I hope you find what you're looking for," spoken with sincerity rather than spite. What was he looking for? The question echoed uncomfortably as Julian dressed for the meeting at Winters and Vicente headquarters. Fame and recognition had driven him for so long that he'd never stopped to consider whether they fulfilled him. His apartment back in New York was filled with evidence of his achievements: magazine covers, industry awards, photographs of him with celebrities, yet the space remained sterile. Unlaid-in. Winters and Vicente occupied a renovated 17th century palazzo in Milan's fashion district. The building balanced historical grandeur with contemporary innovation, much like Sophia's designs. Julian was escorted through light-filled studios where artisans and designers worked in collaborative harmony, up to a conference room with views of the Duomo. "Mr. Hayes," Lorenzo greeted him with a firm handshake. "Thank you for joining us." Julian had expected Sophia to be present, perhaps hoped for it. But Lorenzo was alone, except for two creative directors who were introduced as Francesca and Marco. "Sophia sends her regrets," Lorenzo explained, reading Julian's expression. "She's finalizing details for our Rome atelier opening." The meeting proceeded professionally, with Lorenzo outlining their vision for the Campagna series focusing on the artisans behind the brand, showcasing the human element of luxury creation. It was a concept that resonated with Julian, reminding him of his early work documenting creators rather than celebrities. "We believe your documentary approach would capture the authenticity we're seeking," Lorenzo concluded. "This isn't about glossy perfection, but about the beauty of dedication and craftsmanship." "Before I accept," Julian said carefully, "I need to address something. Sophia and I have history that ended poorly because of my choices. I wouldn't want to create any discomfort." Lorenzo studied him thoughtfully. "Sophia mentioned your past connection. She also said you're an exceptional photographer who sees beneath surfaces. She approved this meeting." He paused. "The past shapes us, Mr. Hayes, but need not define our future actions." Julian nodded, struck by Lorenzo's composure. Here was a man secure enough in himself and his relationship to consider Julian purely on professional merits. "Then I'd be honored to work with your team," Julian replied. Over the following weeks, Julian immersed himself in the project with a focus he hadn't felt in years. He spent days in the ateliers, photographing artisans whose hands told stories of generational knowledge. He documented the seamstresses, pattern makers, and leather workers whose individual contributions culminated in Sophia's visionary designs. Through his lens, Julian rediscovered what had drawn him to photography, initially not the glamour or recognition, but the privilege of witnessing authentic moments of creation and connection. Each image in the developing campaign reflected this renewed perspective, capturing a humanity that had been missing from his recent work. Sophia visited the Milan atelier during Julian's third week of shooting. He was photographing an elderly embroiderer when her presence registered at the periphery of his awareness. She observed silently, maintaining distance while he completed the session. "Your work has evolved," she noted afterward, examining the images on his laptop. "There's more empathy in these shots." "I've been relearning how to see," Julian admitted. "Your nuance gave me an opportunity I'm not sure I deserved." Sophia considered this. "Lorenzo believes talent shouldn't be wasted, regardless of personal history. It's one of the many reasons I love him." Her words held no barb, just a simple truth. The engagement ring on her finger caught the lighted design that suited her perfectly. Julian noted, unlike the ostentatious piece he once imagined would someday adorn her hand. "Are you happy, Sophia?" The question escaped before he could reconsider it. She didn't answer immediately, her gaze drifting to the artisans working throughout the sunlit space. "I'm fulfilled," she finally said. "In my work, in my relationships, in the life we're building, it's deeper than happiness." Julian nodded, understanding the distinction. "I'm sorry for how things ended between us, not just the betrayal, but for not seeing you, Riley, seeing you when we were together." "We were different people then," Sophia replied. "You taught me something important, though. You showed me I was settling for less than I deserved in my career and in love." A small smile softened her features. "In a way, I should thank you." Irony wasn't lost on Julian. His greatest regret had become instrumental in Sophia's transformation. While he had spent years pursuing external validation, she had built something authentic from the inside out. "The campaign will launch during Paris Fashion Week," Sophia continued. "Professional once more. Lorenzo and I would like you to attend as our guest." 2 months later, Julian stood in a converted Parisian warehouse, where his photographs were displayed alongside Sophia's designs, massive black and white images of hands creating beauty, juxtaposed with the finished garments. Critics and buyers moved through the space, conversations humming with appreciation for the campaign's emotional resonance. "Quite a departure from your usual style," noted a prominent fashion editor. There's a vulnerability here I haven't seen in your work before. Across the room, Sophia and Lorenzo moved among guests. Their connection evident in subtle glances and the natural way they occupied space together. They had announced their wedding date the previous week, a small ceremony in Lorenzo's hometown, planned for the following spring. As the evening progressed, Julian found himself on a balcony overlooking the Seine, seeking a moment of quiet reflection. The door opened behind him, and Lorenzo stepped out, offering a glass of whiskey. "Your work has made this launch our most successful yet," he said, joining Julian at the railing. "You captured exactly what Sophia envisioned." "Thank you for trusting me with it," Julian replied. "It's been transformative." Lorenzo studied him thoughtfully. "What will you do next?" Julian considered the question. The campaign's success had already generated new offers from prestigious brands and publications. Yet something had shifted within him during the project. "I'm thinking of returning to documentary work," he admitted. "There's a nonprofit in Peru preserving traditional textile techniques. They've invited me to document their artisans." Lorenzo nodded approvingly. Following meaning rather than merely success, a worthy pursuit. When Sophia joined them moments later, Lorenzo excused himself with a subtle touch to her shoulder, a private gesture between partners secure in their connection. "Lorenzo mentioned Peru," Sophia said, her expression curious. "That sounds like the Julian the first knew, the one who wanted his work to matter." "I lost sight of that person for a while," Julian acknowledged, chasing validation from an industry that only values what's new and next. Sophia leaned against the railing, the lights of Paris reflecting in her eyes. "We all get lost sometimes. Important thing is finding your way back to authenticity." Looking at her confident, accomplished, genuinely happy, Julian finally understood what he had failed to see years ago. Success wasn't about being admired, but about creating work that reflected one's true self. About building relationships that fostered growth rather than validated insecurities. "I have one more photograph for you," Julian said, retrieving an envelope from his jacket. It didn't fit the campaign, but I thought you might want it. Inside was a single Prince Sophia in her atelier, captured in an unguarded moment of pure creative focus. Light streaming through windows as her hands shaped fabric into art. It wasn't a glamour shot, but a document of a woman in her element, fully embodying her purpose. Sophia studied it silently, emotions crossing her features. "You always did see me most clearly through your lens," she finally said. "Even when you couldn't see me in real life. I'll have it framed for your wedding gift," Julian offered. "Thank you." She tucked the photograph carefully into her clutch. "For this, and for being part of the journey that brought me here, even the difficult parts." As Sophia returned to the exhibition, to Lorenzo, and to the life she had created, Julian remained on the balcony, watching the city lights shimmer on the river below. For the first time in years, he felt unburdened by regret or ambition, present in a moment that held neither past nor future, but simply was. He had lost Sophia, yes, but in that loss, he might finally rediscover himself.